Hello, welcome back to our fourth author chat. Today, I'm Diana Davis. This is my co-author, Audrey, and today we're here to talk about her book number 4 in the Sisters of the Revolution series, Liberty's Charge. So, Audrey, tell us a little bit about the hero and heroine of Liberty's Charge. We've got Gilbert Brand as our hero, and we've got the second sister in the Hayes family, Patience Hayes, as our heroine. What do they like?
Before we started writing, we had a conversation about all of the Hayes sisters and kind of thinking about what their personalities might be like. And we also talked about different heroes and different professions that they might have, because we wanted to explore, different parts of society. And so we'd said a politician.
Tropes. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. And I majored in political science. So I was like, great, I want to do a politician. And when I've read romances that have politicians, they're usually like more alpha. And I thought about that. And then I thought about the aspects of politicians. I think that all of us, no matter where you're from, like you're familiar with this concept of this politician who is, very pleasant and affable, but you can't pin them down. And so I really wanted to go with that. And then that really led me to think about who would that character be and what would he be like and why would he be like that? And so thinking about all of that led me to Gilbert Brand. He is an up and coming lawyer. So we have a lot of lawyers in our series, but it was a great career for a man, that wasn't independently wealthy, could make a good living at doing that. And he is very excited. He was sort of run out of town because he was courting an affluent man's daughter, and to get rid of him because this man didn't really want Gilbert as a son-in-law, he kind of makes him a delegate from Delaware. And we pan Delaware a lot in our series, so no offense to Delaware, you're great. But Gilbert is coming from Delaware, which is definitely a backwater compared to Philadelphia, which is really the huge, nicest city in the colonies at that point. And here he is, he's a delegate.
It was also really interesting to us to discover kind of actually later on that Delaware was not a separate colony or state until 1776. So
we talk about 13 original colonies, and Delaware is really sliding in there. I think barely before they declared independence, they'd become
like a month before the Declaration of Independence, the 3 counties of Delaware declared independence from the colony of Pennsylvania.
So kind of interesting. So here's Gilbert. He's come to Philadelphia, and his goal in being there is really just to make connections and have a good time. And he's trying to make his way in life. And one thing about Gilbert that you kind of find out throughout the book is that he, similar to Owen, but different, he came from a difficult background. Unlike Owen, who was very poor, but he always had a strong family, Gilbert was very poor, or at least was raised in very straitened circumstances, and he didn't have a very strong family. His mother died when he was younger, and his father was very abusive. So he had this older brother who was his protector, and then Gilbert has, through the machinations of his father, become estranged from his brother, who he really just loved and looked up to. So when Gilbert
gets him back,
and who was his protector? Yes,
we love Phineas. And right now, and spoiler alert, he doesn't get a happy ending in the series yet. We know what happens, but right now he doesn't have a happy ending in the series. So we
owe him that. We owe Phineas a happy ending. So here's Gilbert, and this comes into play in the epilogue after book 3. But Gilbert finds out his brother has been arrested as a smuggler, and he is in big trouble. So he shows up looking for a really good lawyer, but
shows up in Philadelphia,
and he's heard Josiah Hayes is the man to talk to, and he ends up meeting Patience that way. And Patience's first impression of him is like, I think they start off, they're attracted to each other from the beginning, but she kind of like unsure of, who is this guy who just showed up out of nowhere and needs a lawyer. He's a lawyer himself. Why doesn't he defend his own brother? And the book gets into a little bit more about that. So I think Gilbert is just a really positive and happy character who at his core, is really just because he's suffered a lot in his life. He hides that very well, but he is looking for stability and comfort and just to have some of those things that he didn't have growing up.
Yeah, kind of similar to Temperance.
Yeah, like he takes a little bit of a different tack where Temperance is establishes like a very firm sense of self. Gilbert tries to just be conciliatory to everyone, and that really leads Patience initially to look down on him. She thinks, well, this guy is sliding in and out of every opinion. I can't tell if he's a loyalist or a patriot, and that's a pretty big deal at this point. The novel starts off at the beginning of the Second Continental Congress, so people are taking sides. They're really establishing stakes in the conflict. And here's Gilbert, who basically kind of changes his answer about where he stands to suit his listeners. And Patience doesn't have a lot of respect for that. She's a patriot. And so Patience is a brilliant legal mind, and that's well recognized by her family and her by Owen, who she sort of works with. She helps out her father.
Owen says.
According to Owen Randolph, she's an excellent legal mind, and her father relies on her heavily. He has no sons, but even if he did, I think everyone just acknowledges Patience's legal brilliance. She's very good at researching cases of the law, which is, and we can talk more about that interesting way that they practice law and research law in the 18th century. And she is, I think, a little bit misunderstood by her sisters. I mean, don't we all feel like that too? If you have siblings, then you get maybe a persona in the family, and she's kind of seen as being stoic a little, or I don't know, just only focused on her work. And she does work very hard, and she does like to work. But she meets Gilbert, and kind of he upends a little bit of that in her life.
Yeah. I think Patience also plays a very interesting role in her family because she gets a lot put on her. She's a middle child, and she and I share an Enneagram type, and we're fives. And one of the things that they always say about fives is that fives need to be free from other people's obligations. And that just doesn't happen when you have a large family. Like, she's one of 5 daughters. I have 5 children. Like, there's no such thing as a life free of other people's obligations. And so it's very taxing on a 5. So it's very taxing on Patience to have all these demands being put on her. And eventually she has to learn to put herself first.
She does. And I feel for her. And she's not the oldest, and I am the oldest of 5 kids. But even though she's not the oldest, Temperance has married, spoiler, and she's moved on. And so Patience is now the de facto oldest daughter, and caring about all of her sisters and her parents, and then also having this strong desire to be able to do this interesting work that's really important. She becomes heavily involved in Gilbert's brother's trial. And so a man's life is really in the balance throughout her time in this book. And she wants to do a good job. And I think it's really noble, like what she's trying to do, but also to balance that with the needs and expectations of her family. And there's a lot of frustration. And, I'm sure that a lot of those issues of kind of family and work balance, are from my own life and Diana's life. And so of course that leaked out onto the page. But yeah, I think Patience is a character with a lot of potential, and just to stay true to the time period, there's ample evidence that women have always been brilliant and capable, and did often assist in doing work of all kinds. And in some cases, widows would actually take over their husbands' businesses. I don't have any evidence that they took over a legal practice, although,
definitely printers did that. Like, there are several cases of printers doing that, and lots of other, merchants.
And even if the men were still alive, we have a lot of evidence, even with scientific research and writing, that women were taking a very active role in doing a lot of work and research and writing. And so, it's really not not impossible that you would have a woman who could have been doing some of the things that Patience was doing. But again, to kind of be true to the time, it's lamented by multiple characters that Patience isn't able to take over her father's practice, because she would be really
in court. She can't go and actually do the representation of Phineas.
Right. She has to rely on other people to kind of be the presentation of all of her, hard work and brilliance. Nobody ever really questions that things are the way they are, because again, this is the 18th century. And so that would be a pretty big upheaval to have women arguing cases in court. But they do, our characters are enlightened enough to see that it's, a shame that she's not doing those things.
It's the enlightenment, right?
Yeah, they're starting that enlightenment. And the only other thing I would say that's interesting about Patience is, I think she's very logical and she's very intelligent, and in her mind, she would like to be married, and that should be an intellectual, logical decision. So she has this suitor who seems to
next.
Yeah, Fisher Marks is a printer, a patriotic printer. Is very patriotic. That's hashtag patriotism is like totally how you would describe Fisher.
We discovered, like, we were both picturing, before we had cast an actor, we were both picturing a very similar image for Fisher Marks, and then we discovered like a whole series of French paintings and that where they have someone who basically looks like Fisher Marks as a very it's not the same person, but a very iconic French freedom fighter from the Revolution era and the early 19th century eras, where they have, the blonde curls, and it's a very iconic image. And so we also think of like Enjolras from Les Mis, also often cast as blonde. I'm blanking on the actor's name in the film version, but like we very much thought of him like, I would die for my country, and he's like, no, I'm serious though. So
yeah, and Fisher is really hardworking. Like I said, he's a printer and he's a writer, and Fisher and Patience really admire each other professionally, and in Patience's mind, like that's a really good foundation for a relationship, a logically good foundation.
They respect one another. He respects her work. He wants to be able to support her legal research, and he knows that she can help him in his business. So,
and then you have Gilbert, who doesn't have really a feather to fly with, and she doesn't know what Gilbert believes because it changes all the time, and I think she's very attracted to him, like I said, from their first meeting. But, logically, that doesn't make any sense. Why, Fisher has an established business, and why would she throw away the opportunity to have a respectful, mutual relationship with somebody on a guy who's just fluent. He wrote in from Delaware, and
Delaware,
yeah, the backwater of Newcastle, and she doesn't know what he believes in.
There is a Delaware delegate.
Yeah.
He, in some ways, he is a little similar to. That song is actually not about the Continental Congress, or it's about the Constitutional Convention, not the Continental Congress. But in some ways, he is kind of like this very young figure that people don't really know about. Eventually, he does get to play a really cool role that we borrowed from someone in history, but that's not till book 6 that we can talk about that. 6, right?
I think so.
5. It's 5.
Oh yeah.
So we borrowed it from someone in history. But speaking of borrowing things from history, so what kind of research did you get to do? I learned cool things about?
Tons about the Continental Congress. This is the time period where they're really deciding whether or not they want to declare independence, and so I got to do that research.
So at this time, they don't.
Right, not in this book. But that was certainly what to do next about the situation with England, and right after the events of this novel. The events of this novel take place right after Lexington and Concord, which many people may remember the midnight ride of Paul Revere, and
in fact, they get the news of Lexington and Concord in the epilogue of book 3. So
yes,
Gilbert's there when that happens, and
so the tensions had been boiling in Boston for a while with the Boston Massacre, which took place, quite some time before. But there's this idea that you have this British military presence and increasing agitation among these Bostonians, which becomes kind of another inside joke, a little about Boston, which is taken from history. Like other people at the time were like, "Oh, those Bostonians are hotheads and they're like crazy. We can't listen to them, Yeah,
we can't let them, take us off on this tangent.
They're gonna just have us in a war with England. We can't do this." So these events, shots have been fired on colonial soil. People have died, and so there's a lot of emotion behind that, and wondering, what do we do? Do we just capitulate and appease England, and do we continue to press for our rights? So tensions were pretty high at this time, and Unfortunately, the records of the deliberations of the Continental Congress leave much to be desired. Their secretary chose to be very sparse in recording the actions.
Remember, he kept better notes, but he burned them.
Yeah.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks a lot.
They I guess his feeling was just, let's stick to votes and didn't really have a lot of detail about arguments. However, people that attended the Congress, it was supposed to be a closed proceeding. So they weren't supposed to talk about what happened, but they did, as you can imagine. And so we do have a lot of records of people, it's like, hey, today in Congress, writing home, this is what, Mr. Hancock said.
Come from John Adams.
Yeah, and John Adams was a prolific letter writer.
Everybody today. Charles Thompson, he was trying to protect people. I'm like, but history. John Adams, the salt. Look, his papers are so shady they could be a national forest.
And that's something that's been really interesting. We read a lot of secondary sources initially, as many people do, and a lot of people will say, such and such tensions were riding in the Congress. Well, you find out that the source for a lot of what we believe about this Continental Congress
and personalities
came from John Adams and his opinions, and they were certainly tainted by his own bias, as anybody's would be, because he was such a prolific letter writer and journalist. So really a lot of what historians will say comes from the journals of John Adams and the letters of John Adams. Yeah. And now I am a little wary of, if they're 100% accurate.
Let me say this another way. His papers and his letters throw so much shade. They could be a national forest. Like, he clearly has a personal antipathy. He clearly has a personal antipathy against, for example, John Hancock, who in the surviving letters from John Hancock is nothing but nice to John Adams.
Yeah.
So,
and after John Hancock died, all of a sudden John and Abigail Adams are like, it's the best man who ever lived. Like, we love him so much. And yet he really hated John Hancock, it seems like, and was very jealous of him, which I could talk for like 10 hours about, the Hancocks and the Adams and
but we need to talk about John Hancock at least a little bit. We've mentioned Phineas, we've mentioned Fisher Marks. We have to talk about John Hancock.
Yeah. So I'm, researching for this book, and I need to include some personalities of different people that were there. And I had the idea that it would be great to have Gilbert kind of caught in between two sides, like he is mentally, and now we're going to have people that represent these different, the loyalist side and the patriot side. So I'm like, okay, I need a patriot who was there at the Continental Congress. And I realized pretty quickly, John Hancock was there. He didn't attend the first Congress, but he did attend the second. And he's a really wealthy guy. So he represents in a lot of ways Gilbert's aspirations. He would love to be wealthy. And John Hancock it's amazing. But like, I wrote him as being very affable and generous, and guess what? He turns out to be incredibly affable and generous, and people really love him. And he's very noted for his generosity.
So generous that his wife had to hide the money chest
from him, from giving away too much. So yeah, it's just kind of incredible. So John Hancock ends up becoming the president of the Congress, and
which is true.
Yes, and he's also, this part is fabricated, but he becomes a mentor to Gilbert, and their relationship continues. I know. Sorry, spoiler. He's not really Gilbert's mentor. But yeah, like, I just love the character of John Hancock, and I've read and studied so much of his life, and he just turned out to be a really interesting historical figure that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough, because he became the governor of Massachusetts, but he did die, twice, but he did die, unfortunately, and wasn't really around for like the Continental Congress.
Alert.
Yeah, sorry, another spoiler. And so I think because of that, he kind of gets brought up a little bit, but for signing the Declaration, but his other contributions in life are really forgotten about.
Yeah, definitely downplayed. And then he also doesn't have a legacy. His children both died in their youth, kind of tragically. And so we weep for him. So
yeah, he had a pretty sad outcome. And he's another character like Phineas that I feel like I owe him his own love story, because his love story was really interesting, like his real life.
And we get to touch on that a little bit in Liberty's Charge, and then follow up in the Christmas story that goes with Liberty's Charge. His fiance, we think, is back in Boston, and he is writing to her and sending her gifts and always lamenting that she doesn't write him back enough, which is actually how it went. So,
and crazy. This is one of those times where the truth is definitely stranger than fiction. She was being courted by Aaron Burr, the Aaron Burr that you're thinking of. And that is kind of what's a letter from John Hancock's aunt is what spurs him. Like, you need to come back and marry Dolly because Aaron Burr is courting her, and she's walking out with
orphan is over.
Yeah.
Moving in.
Very charming, because Dolly and Lydia Hancock, which is John Hancock's aunt, were staying with Aaron Burr's uncle. He shows up for a visit and is very charming and affable in his own right. And so John Hancock, during a break in Congress, so right after the events of this novel, goes back and marries Dolly and brings her back to Philadelphia. And she didn't like Philadelphia, but she apparently was essential to his work and wrote a lot of his correspondence and helped him a great deal. So again, the contributions of women, to this history are not always noted, but really, really important.
Absolutely. And then we didn't feel like we could actually pull in Aaron Burr. So we have a fictionalized version. We put a thin veneer on Aaron Burr in the story, and John Hancock actually gets him to come down to Philadelphia to help with Phineas's case, allegedly, but he is completely incompetent. So
yes,
it's all over the place.
I couldn't throw too much shade on a real life person. I didn't feel like
other than John Adams.
So we don't care for that much, if you can't tell. But the rival of John Hancock definitely plays a role in this book as well.
So if you can't tell, I love Audrey's secondary characters. They're amazing. But maybe we need to focus again on our hero and heroine, because I want to know why they're perfect for one another. We've talked a lot about why they're not sure, like especially Patience is not sure about Gilbert. So why do they end up together? What makes them perfect for one another?
Yeah, I think, we've talked a little bit about this in our other videos, but really what everyone is looking for is a person who can see them at the core and someone they can be vulnerable with and trust and maybe see a part that other people don't see. So for Gilbert, Patience, after her initial concern about, wondering like, what do you really believe in? She really gets to know Gilbert and she sees a lot of his strengths. They have a really fun kind of adventure as they're looking for a law textbook that they need, or a law book. And
that sounds like a fun adventure right there.
Yeah. Well, it's fun to a nerd who likes history, I guess, and somebody who reads legal books. And she sees like, hey, this guy is so good at charming people and this can really pay off. And she also gets to see him like how he is in court. And she's very excited to see that because he's very polished and he's a great lawyer in terms of his arguments that he can make and his mannerisms and his, as for somebody who's able to, she only has the ability to write her thoughts. She's not able to present her own cases in court. She and Gilbert end up making a really great duo where she can do the scholarship and he can present them in a way that's really compelling. And I think she just gets to know his heart and just see, the really good person that he is. And just, again, almost like Temperance, she decides she's going to prize love and the love that and respect that they have for each other over her initial belief about the type of life that she would have, would make her happy. And she ends up rejecting her printer suitor, and deciding, I'm going to follow my heart and love. And then Gilbert on the other hand.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that with Gilbert, he, like Owen, is inspired by Hayes' sister to grow and become a stronger person, and and stand up for what he believes in and stand up for himself.
Yeah, I think Gilbert, he kind of starts off just thinking his misbelief is that as long as he can make people happy, then he will be successful, and he doesn't want to anger anybody. And it's pretty sad how he ended up coming to that conclusion. I think as you get to know Gilbert better, you really have a lot more compassion for why he would think that. And so it takes a lot of courage for him to take a side and take a stance and potentially give up some security and safety in doing that. But he does, and it's really incredible. And Patience is definitely a person who inspires him. And he just really loves and admires Patience. She's a little bit like Helen from A Lady to Lead, our second book, in that she's not, maybe she's not just like a homemaker who wants to just sit at home and I don't want to rephrase that. I don't like that. I think Patience is similar to Helen in that they are strong women characters and hoping to find somebody who really admires that about them and doesn't just tolerate that about them. And so Patience really can tell that Gilbert really admires and looks up to her and is a little bit in awe of her and isn't sort of afraid of her. It's funny, she's one of our jokes for Patience is that all of her father's law clerks have tried to propose to her or tried to walk out with her or court her because, they want to take over the law practice. Really, it's mercenary. And, Gilbert.
And she's very pretty.
And she's really pretty. Right. And I think she hasn't really been interested in any of them. And she says that. But Gilbert has really turned her head and she decides to marry him. And we get to see, spoiler alert, again, they do end up together. And I love getting to see them throughout the series as well and getting to see Gilbert kind of grow and his relationships with, again, all of the different family members. But I especially love in Devotion's Cost. We get to see a little bit of Patience and Gilbert and their family life and it's really fun.
Yeah, and their baby. Who never I like the baby. He's not a baby anymore, he's a toddler at this point. In one of the Christmas stories in the second Christmas book, where we find out that their little boy is extremely mischievous and they are going to be in for quite the ride. So yeah,
there's even kind of a deleted scene from Devotion's Cost, just had to cut it for time, but their baby is trouble from the start. He's just a handful, and
they knew he was trouble when he walked in.
Yeah. And Gilbert and John Hancock have a continuing history that is just fun and funny through our Christmas stories, through our proposal stories, and just really enjoy that as well.
So speaking of John Hancock, David, Gilbert, we have so many iconic looks in this story because we've got 3 different people who want to look, and Fisher, 4 different people who want to look real good, who keep up with fashion and dress well. So what iconic looks? I love how it's always the men that we talk about, even though like when we're talking about this offline, we're like, oh, and Cassandra's dress here, and and then we like, so tell us about the waistcoats. So tell us about
yes. Well, it's just this is like the last time where men were able to really like wear really bright, flashy colors until maybe arguably today. Mm-hmm. Even though it's still not as, the day wear of men today.
Maybe.
Yeah. And so I think like, it's something that we pinpoint just because it's really unique when you're talking about history. But the look that actually
love for it, like
yeah, I mean, right.
If we're gonna talk about the founders, we were just talking about this morning. Like, if we're gonna talk about the founders' original intent, like, please put back on powdered wigs, please.
We would like to go back to the powdered wig and the waistcoats and the coats, the embroidery. Definitely.
So, I only want to hear about the founders' original intent if you're gonna dress like that.
Fashion.
Anything you have to say.
Yes. The look that just jumped in my mind is in our Christmas book, or our first Christmas book, Colonial Christmas. And this look, the giving gift to each other after the first Christmas, after Patience and Gilbert are together, is kind of an important part of this story. And so Gilbert is able to open up a suit of clothing that he just really loves. And he's actually in the Continental Congress, and David and John Hancock are around, and it's just a really fun moment for Gilbert.
Appreciating the fashion.
Yes, it's a green taffeta. It's braided and embroidered, which the braiding would have been along the coat, and it had large silver buttons. And then there was a pink waistcoat with a floral pattern, and he's very excited to receive this. Just very eager.
And David picked it out, so we know it looks good.
Yeah, it was from David's tailor. He advised Patience on that and chose the look. So yes.
So I think there is another green suit that is also quite iconic. As a little bit of a spoiler, it's a gift from someone else. And I won't go into too much, but it does play an important role in the plot, I think. So, is it Velvet? I can't remember, but
I can't remember.
Gilbert gets another gift suit. This is the thing with, he's an Enneagram 7. We talk about the Enneagram a lot, but it makes it very easy to write for us because, we have a frame of reference for our characters' personalities. And I swear they just get everything. They are the people who like invented the secret, right? Like they just manifest it and they get whatever they want. It's insane.
Probably just because they're so delighted to receive anything that it's like really a joy to give them that, something.
It really is. And they're rarely easy to shop for because they love everything. So
yeah. So Gilbert's, he loves fashion. He's an aspirant of fashion, I would say, and especially looks to David and then also John Hancock, but mostly David to know how to dress.
As you do. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course. It's a good person to model your look and personality off of.
Definitely. We highly recommend it to everyone.
So this book, more than any of our other books, is very tightly entwined with the book that comes afterwards. And so and even there's some overlap and some surprising things that you'll find out in the next book that I think a few of our readers may have picked up on some things. I don't want to be too spoilery, but
yeah. So I guess we'll talk about that next time in our author chat. But I was thinking about one of the when we were talking about the law clerks that have been proposing to Patience, one little tiny kind of an Easter egg, little hidden moment in book 3. Actually, Owen sits down next to Patience at a party, and they're just talking because they're friends. She's always at the law office. She knows he is in love with Temperance, and she is kind of protective of him because she knows her sister also. But it comes out in the conversation that there was an assumption, not between them, but they, maybe they thought other people thought that they would marry. And just to confirm that, make it canon, I think in the back of Patience's mind, she assumed that was what would happen. Because Owen would never get Temperance, and and
again, Patience is very practical. So in her mind, again, this is her mentality when she's starting the book. Owen works for her father. She respects Owen as a lawyer. She respects him as a person. They are friends. It makes logical sense. The two of them would marry, and then Owen would take over the practice from her father.
Again, she knows that Owen is in love with Temperance, but Temperance has no interest in being with someone who can't take it financially. So.
Spoiler alert for their proposal story, but let's just say nobody believes that Temperance would go for Owen to the point where it causes problems for them when they actually are serious.
Yes, you have the proposal stories are free short stories that you get on our email list. And I love their proposal story. It is awesome because Owen goes to ask for her hand and things go awry.
Right, because everyone knows Temperance and they know her goal is to marry a wealthy man, and Owen is not wealthy at this point, so it's no one really believes that. But yeah, I think just again, Patience is logical, and I don't know if
it would have worked out. It would have been okay. As long as she's okay with her husband being in love with her sister.
Yeah, and I think it sets up Patience well, but she does have a good respect for Owen, and he has a good respect for her, and they're friends. And there's never anything romantic between the two of them. And
it would have been a kind of a platonic marriage of convenience. So,
and really, there's nothing romantic between Fisher, Marks, and Patience, the printer who courted her, either. And both of them are very aware of that. They're not really in love, and they're both trying to be really logical about the decision to marry. And it's interesting, as we have done historical research, the idea of marrying for love was really just originating around this time, and that we can tell, at least. I'm not saying people didn't love each other, but this idea that would be an ideal, that you would have this union of people who were in love to marry.
Because we all know that love doesn't always last, and so it wasn't seen as necessarily the best basis for a marriage all the time. And that that hugely depends. Like upper class people, very much. It's about preserving your property and your money and your fortune and your legacy, making sure that you continue to have progeny. Like it's very much a business deal, basically. Lower class people, maybe not.
but always for women, because they lacked the legal rights and wealth, the ability to accumulate wealth. There's always a determination of like making a choice for security and just having a livelihood, having a life, being able to have food and shelter. And so Patience is really uniquely privileged, even for her time, that her father, is allowing her to be a part of his law practice, but also like there's an expectation that he will provide for his children, that I don't think this is ever stated, but there's no pressure on her to marry and leave because, her father doesn't want to care for her anymore. And I think that the assumption is like, if something were to happen to Josiah, he would have provided for his wife and daughters so that she didn't have to marry. It wasn't a choice between like, hey, you're going to be destitute and on the street, which unfortunately a lot of women were in that position.
We kind of turned that on its head a little bit because Gilbert doesn't have money, and he wants that financial security too. And so he also pursues someone else who does have money, someone that we also love, but maybe should we leave it as a surprise? What do you think?
No, I think it happens pretty early on. So Euphemia, who is one of my favorite characters ever from the whole series, is like, she's ready to marry.
Also needs her own book.
Yeah, she deserves her own book too. And she sees Gilbert and she is like, yes, that is the one I want. And she's very used to her father obtaining things for her, and not, I love Euphemia, so I don't think she's malicious at all, but this is what she's used to. And so her father obtains her Gilbert Brand as a suitor. And so there's a lot of, it's not like a love triangle. It's like a love hexagon. I don't know. Pentagram. I don't think something. There's a lot of connections here of different people. Yeah. A lot of misbelief about like the type of relationship that would make you happy. And for Gilbert, Euphemia represents everything that he's looking for. And again, like you said, it's kind of a reversal of the woman being in that position, but Gilbert wants the security and Euphemia can provide that.
And Patience can't. They don't, Josiah is well off, but he has 5 daughters. He can't give all of them a good dowry. So, which was customary at the time. Yeah.
So there's a lot of trust, I guess, for Gilbert, and also patience to say, am I going to really choose to go after love? And that's a hard choice, but ultimately I think they are able to trust each other. And Gilbert, I will say, of all of our heroes, I mean, I feel like he really struggles at the beginning to find himself, but he really redeems himself in a way that is really touching to me, and really proves that he is being decisive and making a choice to follow his heart in more than one way.
Choices. Actually, he has to make a lot of big choices in the climactic sequence of the book. He makes a lot of really good decisions finally that Patience and other people have been waiting desperately for. So,
and I think hopefully, I really wanted to make sure it's believable. Always, you want to make sure that it's believable that these two people will fall in love and want to be together. And so I really needed Gilbert to give Patience enough reason to take a chance on a guy who, again, doesn't have any money, doesn't really have a thriving law practice. It's sort of a profession, but why would she choose him? Why would she put all of her trust to leave a really comfortable situation with her family to follow this guy? And hopefully I think it pays off in the end.
Absolutely. I love to see Gilbert grow and who he becomes. And then like you said, it's so fun to see him throughout the series, and, especially as he works with John Hancock. Love John Hancock.
Another Enneagram, maybe type 7. We just love our type 7 and Euphemia as well. So, so we love our type 7 characters. Like, they're just so fun. And
7s are in real life. A lot of my closest friends after Audrey are 7s. This is because 5s are introverts and 7s are extroverts, and they adopt you. So
yeah, they're really delightful and fun, and just bring a lot of joy to our lives and to the series. So
yes, our copy editor, our proofreader, is also a 7. So
yes, shout out.
Hey Sally, she'll never see this. I mean, she'll watch it if I tell her, but
yeah. So I just really hope that readers enjoy this book as much as I did, and just even going back through in preparation for this conversation, noticed so many fun scenes and relationships and characters that.
Yeah, I mean, we wrote these books so quickly, so it's like it's kind of on to the next one. And so then when we get to the chance to go back and relive these characters, like, oh yeah, I loved this. Oh yeah, it's amazing how much you forget so quickly just because we had to keep working. So
We try to use a lot of historical elements as much as possible, but I did have to invent a game for this book because there wasn't a good, it really needed to come together, and there wasn't a good historical correlation. And that ended up being something really fun that our biggest fan noticed and picked up on this game, which is our biggest fan is one of our biggest fans is Diana's daughter, teenage daughter, who really has enjoyed the books.
Yes, we love her and her devotion. We feel like she gets it. She understands like David and Owen. She picked up on this game. I love the game because Temperance immediately, and when they're playing the game, the Temperance's first move is to sacrifice Owen, her husband, and
who is
she's just
mildly horrified.
Yes, and she's just like, emotions don't have anything to do with the game. Like,
yeah, so we get to see so many personalities, and that's part of what I was trying to do with this game, is that you get to see you get to see how people would interact in real life and different things. One of the things that we didn't talk about yet is that there's also a little side plot that ties into one of our short stories. Nathaniel has also been in this book. So Phineas Brand, Gilbert's brother, has been imprisoned by the British for smuggling, and that was something that actually occurred. Boston was under occupation by British soldiers, and so in order to get to supply the Patriots or the Continentals, they weren't really Continentals quite yet, but that movement, people had to smuggle goods into them, ammunitions and food.
Gunpowder, especially
the ammunitions,
yeah.
right? And so Phineas is in prison, and then Nathaniel, who, as we know, is a merchant captain, he's the hero of our second book, and so he is in prison in Boston. And so the characters find out about this, and it's a lot of stress because a smuggler could be executed if they're found guilty, and really being picked up, by a military tribunal doesn't look great for you. The outcome
looks bad on the resume.
Yeah, and so it's really exciting. Owen goes off to save Nathaniel, and if you read our box set, then you get access to this exclusive story, which is what happens. And until the box set was released, it's the details of what happened aren't out there. So we're really excited to share that with everyone.
Yeah, and it's hilarious. P.S. I said I wrote it. I can say that myself.
Yes, it's really funny and good, and so
it's based on an actual person who really escaped jail. Like, we know he gets out that way. So,
and another bromance. So we have Owen going off to save Nathaniel, and it's funny. And again,
we joke all the time that our actual genre is historical bromance, but
yes, we love it. So many of them, and a lot occur in this book in particular with Gilbert and John Hancock. One thing that carries out of this, though, is that Fisher and Gilbert really do not like each other. So they are
actually, I worked really hard in book. We'll talk about this in our author chat for book 5. It is not really because Fisher loves Patience. He doesn't. He respects her. He knows he's not in love with her, and that's actually why he wants to court her. So it's very easy to think he's just bitter, but no, it's because he doesn't. And this is kind of based off a relationship with one of my sisters, who is also an Enneagram 7, I think. I was like 30 before I understood that her way of interacting with the world is also legitimate, and it's not a front, and it's not, this is really how she sees the world. And
we should be fair and say that Fisher's Enneagram type is a type 1, which is my type. So I'll totally own that we can be very judgmental about other people and think that we are the arbiters of what is good and just, and we can be very passionate. Like Fisher's patriotism, he's very certain that he's doing the right thing, and he's very admirable in his patriotism, and I think we love that. That resonates. But he just doesn't really respect Gilbert at all, and the fact that he's wishy-washy, according to Fisher, about, and just the fact that he won't take a stand as a patriot is the first thing that kind of rubs Fisher the wrong way. And then to see Patience, who Fisher has decided like, okay, this would be a good wife for me. And she decides to go for Gilbert. He's just like, what in the world? Why would someone so level-headed and intelligent just throw herself away on this fly-by-night lawyer?
Yeah. So it's not, and it's so complex because it's not that he's in love with her. He's like, why would you choose him over me ever? I don't get it.
And I think, this book has a lot of foils, and so Patience has to choose between Fisher and Gilbert and kind of her heart and her mind. And then Fisher also has a lot of choices to make about, what he wants to do. And it's just pretty interesting.
Well, we have a lot more to say about Fisher, and we will have to do that in the book 5 author chat. We're very excited to see you guys next time. So be sure to join us. Thank you again, Audrey. And
yeah, thank you.
Signing off.